Looking back, I suppose I was always averse to games of chance. As a kid, I watched my uncle throw away paycheck after paycheck on scratch tickets, convinced his next dollar would be the one to change everything. It never did. He died penniless, his only legacy a battered shoebox stuffed with losing tickets and unpaid debts. My father used to shake his head at his brother's self-destruction, muttering under his breath about weak men and their vices. Maybe that was the moment the lesson took root in me. Gambling wasn't a thrill. It was a slow-motion wreck, an inevitability waiting to happen. That aversion stuck with me into adulthood. In high school, while my friends played dice games behind the gym for whatever crumpled bills they could scrape together, I kept my distance. I never understood the rush, the allure of risking what you had for something you probably wouldn't get. Even when they tried to goad me into playing, laughing at my refusal, I never caved. It wasn't fear. It was simply the understanding that nothing good came from wagering what you couldn't afford to lose. My stubbornness followed me into college. That's when I first met Kathy. She was magnetic, effortlessly charismatic in a way I'd never been. Where I saw risk, she saw opportunity. She wasn't reckless, though. She was sharp, calculating. I admired that about her, even if I didn't always understand it. She could take a losing hand and bluff her way into winning, and she made it look easy. That was her gift, her edge. It was never about the cards. It was about how well she could convince everyone else they'd already lost. She tried to teach me once. I remember sitting across from her in our tiny off-campus apartment, a deck of cards between us, her eyes glinting with amusement as I fumbled through the basics. She had patience at first, but as the night stretched on, it became painfully clear. I just didn't have the instinct for it. Kathy finally sighed, shook her head, and tossed the cards onto the table. "You think too much," she said, smiling. "Poker's not about playing the game. It's about playing the people." That was the last time we ever tried. Years passed, and Kathy's passion for poker only grew. I didn't mind. If anything, I liked how much she loved it, but I never joined in. It wasn't my world, and I was perfectly content on the sidelines. When she started going to regular poker nights with her old college friends, I encouraged her. It made her happy, and that was enough for me. But I never anticipated just how much those nights would take from us. She loved poker and had a real talent for it. She occasionally entered local tournaments and held her own, but most of the time, she stuck to playing with her usual group. They gathered at Larry and Sandy's townhouse in the suburbs once or twice a month. And to be clear, these were her friends, not mine. Kathy had known them since college. Sandy had even been her roommate. The regular players were Larry, Sandy, Kathy, Paul, Brian, Terry, and Mark. As for me, I wasn't part of the game. Instead, I usually sat in the living room with Paul's wife, Mary, and Brian's wife, Allison, watching TV while they played. There used to be another guy in the group, Wes, but he got caught cheating and was promptly thrown out. I didn't mind Kathy's poker nights, but like I said, these weren't my people. I actually got along with Mary and Allison. They were becoming good friends, but the rest of them, barely tolerable. I had no desire to interact with them outside of these nights. I wouldn't say I hated any of them, except for Mark. Mark was insufferable, loud, arrogant, and full of himself. He and I had clashed more than once, and the only reason I put up with him at all was because he was part of Kathy's poker circle. The only real problem I had with poker nights was how they brought out Kathy's extreme competitiveness. If she lost, it ruined her entire mood the next day. I had told her multiple times that she was taking it way too seriously, but she always brushed me off. Lately, she had been pushing for poker nights to become a weekly thing, which I absolutely did not want. Thankfully, Mary and Allison shared my feelings, so for now, we had managed to shut that idea down. One Saturday night, we were at Larry and Sandy's as usual, and the game was in full swing. From the looks of it, Kathy was having a rough night. Every so often, I checked in to see if she wanted a drink, and each time, she snapped at me. It was getting late, well past the usual time they wrapped up, when I heard a noise from the dining room where they were playing. Curious, I walked over just in time to hear Mark speaking. "A bet's a bet. Don't try to weasel out of it," he said, smirking. Larry chimed in. "You know how this works, Kathy. You back out on a bet, you're out of the group." Fine, Kathy muttered. "Let's just get it over with. My turn next." I froze mid-step. "What's going on?" Mark's smug face turned toward me. "She lost everything. I was nice enough to let her play the last hand. She lost again. Now, it's time for her to pay up." I squared my shoulders. "Yeah, that's not happening. Kathy isn't doing anything for anyone but me." Mark scoffed. Relax, man. She made a bet and she lost. You know the rules. Then Kathy did something that made my stomach drop. She met my eyes and said, Henry, it's fine. I lost. I have to follow through. No, Kathy, I said, my voice dangerously calm. What you're about to do isn't paying off a bet. It's cheating on me. Mark rolled his eyes. Dude, you're right there. That doesn't count as cheating. My hands clenched into fists. Shut your damn mouth. Kathy looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed. Come on, Henry, we're leaving. But instead of standing up, she hesitated. Then she turned to Paul and Brian. Guys, help me out here. Before I had time to react, Paul and Brian grabbed me from behind. I struggled, but then Larry joined in, helping them pin me down. You're seriously holding me back while my wife does this in front of me? I yelled, disbelief surging through me. Larry smirked. She made a bet, she lost, and she knows the consequences. She's not walking away now. Relax. Mark won't take long. That was it. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. Mark stepped forward, already undoing his jeans, grinning like the smug creep he was. Kathy was on her knees, eyes locked on the floor. Catherine, if you do this, we're done, I said, my voice eerily steady. Stop being so dramatic, Henry, she muttered. She leaned forward. Stop, I shouted. She hesitated for just a second and glanced at me. I scanned the room. Just to be clear, everyone's okay with this? Silence. Mark groaned. Come on, man, you're ruining the mood. Kathy turned back toward him. All right, that's enough, I said, exhaling sharply. I can't watch this. Let me go, and I'll leave. I already had the start of a plan. This marriage was over. I knew that. But first, I needed to make sure Mark got exactly what was coming to him. Kathy hesitated for a moment before turning to Paul and Brian, giving them a small nod to release me. They released their grip, and I calmly stepped forward. As I approached, I made a show of twisting my wedding ring, pretending to struggle with it. Kathy was to my left, her face impossible to read. Mark, still grinning, was to my right. I stopped between them and looked down at her. I told you if you did this, we were finished. My left fingers were still spread as though I was working the ring off, but my right hand had already curled into a tight fist. You went ahead and did it anyway, Kathy, and with him. With that final word, I clenched my fist and struck Mark square in the nose. He stumbled back, gripping his face as a sharp gasp filled the room. He clutched his nose in shock, but I wasn't done. Without hesitation, I followed up with another punch, sending his head snapping backward. His legs buckled, his balance gone. With his jeans and boxers tangled around his ankles, he crumpled onto his A before flopping flat on his back, sprawled between the dining table and a bulky antique cabinet. Adrenaline was coursing through me, and I wasn't finished. Kathy stumbled back, landing on the floor while I took a step closer to Mark, towering over him. To my right, the long dining table stretched out, large enough to seat 8 comfortably, 3 chairs on each side. On my left stood an enormous antique cabinet, a massive wooden structure at least 6 feet wide. The base alone was about 30 inches tall, made of heavy oak with drawers and cabinets. Above it, an additional 40-inch section with mirrored glass doors displayed fragile china, delicate figurines, snow globes, and other decorative keepsakes. My eyes locked onto the top of the cabinet. I knew I couldn't knock the entire thing over, but if I could shift it enough, maybe it would send a message. The lower section had to weigh over 300 pounds, solid and unmoving, but the top half? That was a different story. I remembered Larry always complaining about how it wasn't properly secured. I reached up and yanked. The moment the upper section tipped forward, I knew this was going to escalate. It wasn't my original intention to send it crashing down, but as it started to fall, I wasn't exactly sorry. The sound was explosive. Glass shattered as the entire structure lurched forward. Luckily for Mark, there wasn't enough room between the cabinet and the dining table for the entire thing to land directly on him. The base remained where it was, but the top half came crashing forward, landing squarely on the table. Unfortunately for him, every single delicate item inside, the plates, the figurines, the snow globes, came spilling out, smashing against the glass doors before raining down onto him. Shards of broken glass scattered across the floor, some landing on him as he shielded his face with his hands. He winced, clearly in pain, trying to protect himself from the falling debris. But the rest of him, exposed. When he had fallen, his shirt had ridden up, leaving his stomach bare. His jeans and boxers were still tangled around his ankles, leaving his legs completely vulnerable. Deep gashes opened across his torso, his thighs, his shins. He remained motionless on the floor as the aftermath of the chaos settled around him. It all happened in an instant. The room fell into a stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Feigning concern, I quickly stepped around the table. "Don't touch him! Someone call an ambulance!" My voice rang out with urgency. As I approached his head, I crouched low, just close enough for only him to hear. In a whisper, I said, "I hope you keep bleeding, but if not, you know where to find me." I glanced at the debris around him. "And just so you know, there's glass everywhere. If I were you, I'd stay very, very still." Sandy burst out of the kitchen. "Paramedics are on the way. They said 5 minutes." Larry, still visibly shaken, muttered, "Maybe we should call the police." Kathy and I answered at the same time, except she said no, while I said, "Absolutely." Kathy wasn't stupid. She knew that if the police got involved, there would be questions, statements, reports, and that wasn't a conversation she wanted to have. Larry, on the other hand, was furious. "You tried to eliminate him, and you destroyed my damn cabinet. We have to call the cops." I shrugged. "Oh, I wasn't actually trying to eliminate him, but I do think calling the cops is a great idea." I met his glare. "I'd love to explain how you and your buddies held me down while my wife was about to pay off a bet in a way that sounds an awful lot like prostitution." Larry's face darkened. "They won't believe you." I smirked. "Oh yeah? Let's think about that. Who do you think they'll believe? Me? Or the guy lying there half undressed in a room full of married people who aren't his wife?" I gestured around the room. "Go ahead, Larry. Call them. I dare you." He said nothing. I turned toward the door. "I'll go meet the ambulance." As I passed Kathy, she was still kneeling on the floor, staring at Mark's bleeding form. I stopped beside her, pulled off my wedding ring, and tossed it into the pile of shattered glass near Mark's head. "You know what, Kathy? I won't be needing this anymore. If you want it, go ahead and dig it out." Tears streaked her face. She barely noticed my words. Her attention had shifted to something near Mark's head. "Wait, what is this?" She reached out and picked up a few stray playing cards. I tilted my head. "Hold on. Are those extra cards?" Realization hit her like a slap. Her expression twisted with disgust as she turned back to Mark. "You were cheating? You absolute piece of crap! I almost threw away my marriage over a rigged game?" I almost laughed at the irony. I let her have that moment, choosing not to correct her choice of words. That discussion could wait. Mark didn't respond. He kept his hands over his face, breathing heavily, surrounded by shattered glass. I straightened up. "Stay here, Kathy. The ambulance should be here any minute." Without waiting for her to say anything, I walked out the front door, climbed into my car, and drove away. A few blocks down, I passed an ambulance moving slowly, scanning house numbers with a spotlight. I didn't slow down. I didn't even glance back. I just kept driving. When I got home, I wasted no time. I grabbed a suitcase and a couple of duffel bags, throwing in whatever I'd need for the next few days. I had no doubt that sooner or later, someone would show up looking for me. Cops, Kathy, one of those idiots. I wanted to be ready. As I zipped up my bag, I heard the front door open. "Henry!" Kathy's voice called out. I ignored her. "Henry, where are you?" Her footsteps grew closer. I walked out of the bedroom, duffel bag slung over my shoulder. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Oh, there you are." Her voice softened. "Henry, what are you doing? You don't have to leave." I laughed, a dry, humorless laugh. "God, you really don't get it." She crossed her arms. "Oh, I know what you're doing. You're leaving me over this?" I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. "So, what? Larry and Brian were off limits, but Mark was fair game? And seriously, Kathy, this was your way of settling a bet instead of paying cash. How much was it even for?" "Henry, stop," she snapped. "It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. I wasn't going to go through with it. And besides, you stopped me." "Oh, I stopped you." My voice was pure venom. "You were already on your knees. That's not stopping. That's starting." She looked away. "I convinced them not to call the cops, and I found your ring." She held it up like it meant something. I shook my head. "I told you, I don't care. Honestly, I wish they had called the police. Hell, maybe I should go confess. Maybe I should have actually finished the job." Her eyes widened. "Henry, don't say that. Look, we'll just pay for what you broke." I scoffed. "I'm not paying them a damn dime." She hesitated. "Look, poker night isn't for another couple of weeks. Mark won't be invited back, so you don't have to worry." I let out a bitter laugh. 2 weeks, huh? That's all the time you need to move on from this?" She took a step toward me. "Henry, where are you going?" But I was already out the door. By the time I pulled out of the driveway, Kathy was already standing in the doorway, shouting after me. I didn't slow down. I didn't even glance in the rearview mirror. I just drove. After about 10 miles, I found a rundown motel and checked in for the night. As soon as I locked the door behind me, I powered off my phone, stretched out on the bed, and stared blankly at the ceiling. Sleep was impossible at first. My thoughts were too loud, circling back to everything that had happened. It wasn't until around 5 in the morning that exhaustion finally won. Even then, I only managed to sleep for a few restless hours, waking up sometime around 10. After a long, scalding shower, I went to the front desk and extended my stay through Wednesday. When I finally turned my phone back on, the screen lit up with a flood of missed calls. Kathy had called a dozen times, and there were just as many from Allison and Mary. Her messages were filled with excuses, pleas, and desperate attempts at damage control. She kept repeating the same thing over and over. It didn't mean anything. I had no choice. You have to understand. I sent her one response. Why don't you forward all of these messages to your mother and ask her what she thinks? Then I powered my phone off again. With nothing else to do, I wandered. I sat in a park for 2 hours just watching people go by. Then I walked aimlessly through the mall, barely paying attention to the stores around me. Later, I found another park bench and sat there for an hour, lost in thought. Eventually, I stopped at a convenience store, grabbed an armful of junk food, and returned to my motel room, where I spent the rest of the night eating garbage and going down an internet rabbit hole about scams and deception. By 10 o'clock, my body had finally had enough. I passed out. Monday morning, I dragged myself to work, trying to focus, but my mind kept slipping. At some point, I must have been staring too long at my screen because my boss approached my desk. "You good?" he asked. I hesitated before answering. "Family stuff. It's complicated." He nodded. "If you need a few days, take them. Check in with me Wednesday. Let me know if you need more time." That evening, I stopped at a small bar and grill. I needed real food, something better than the processed junk I'd been surviving on. I also wasn't in the mood for people, so I grabbed a booth in the back, hoping to be left alone. But before I could even take my first sip of beer, 2 figures appeared beside my table. Not the waitress. "Hey, Henry," Mary's voice was hesitant. "Mind if Allison and I sit down?" I ignored them, stirring the ice in my water with my straw. Mary slid into the booth anyway. "Are you mad at us too?" Her tone was almost defensive. "What exactly did we do?" I took a slow sip before answering. "Nothing." My voice was calm, steady. Mary and Allison exchanged a glance. Allison spoke next. "If we didn't do anything, then why are you angry? I know you never liked the poker group, but I thought we were at least friends." I exhaled slowly. "I thought so too." I leaned forward, meeting their eyes. "But you didn't do anything, and that's the problem." My voice was sharper now. "Your husband's held me down while my wife was about to—" I stopped myself, jaw tightening. "And what did you two do?" Silence. "Nothing." Mary's gaze dropped to the table. "I didn't think she'd actually go through with it," she mumbled. "I thought it was just a dumb joke." "I couldn't believe it either," Allison added quickly. "She feels awful now. She's terrified you'll send those messages to her mom." Mary's eyes flickered with concern. "You're not actually going to do that, are you?" I shrugged. "Not yet. But I will if I have to." Allison fidgeted. "We know how bad it was. We talked about it after you left. Once the paramedics took Mark away, Larry and Sandy decided not to call the cops. But they want you to pay for the damages." I laughed coldly. "Oh, they do, huh?" I leaned back. "Let me make something clear, Mary. I'm not giving them a damn dime. Larry and Sandy enabled this entire mess. They encouraged Kathy's gambling. Now, I'm not saying it's their fault she can't control herself, but Sandy just stood there and watched it happen. And Larry," I scoffed, "he helped hold me down, just so my wife wouldn't get kicked out of some stupid poker club." Mary's voice softened. "Henry, she's miserable. Please, try to forgive her." I let out a dry laugh. "Forgive her? I don't think she wants forgiveness. I think she wants me to apologize for stopping her from paying her bet." Suddenly, Allison sat up straighter, as if she'd just had some kind of revelation. "What if we balance the scales?" I frowned. "What?" "What if you go out and find someone, to make things even?" I turned to her, speaking slowly, deliberately. "Let me get this straight. I was pinned down by people who called themselves my friends, forced to watch as my wife was about to betray me. And now, to even things out, you think I should, what, sleep with some random woman?" I shook my head. "So, she gets a free pass, and I get to humiliate myself in front of everyone. And even if I did do it, what's stopping her from pretending it never happened? Saying it doesn't count? Allison looked desperate now. Please, Henry, there has to be a way to fix this. I hate seeing my friends suffer. I stared at her. Then I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. That's rich, Mary. You don't want to see me suffer. Where was that concern on Saturday? My voice dropped lower. You watched the whole thing. You stood there while it happened. I was in pain and you didn't care. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Friends don't do that, I said simply. We're not friends. To me, they were just as guilty as the rest of them. And now? I had a plan forming. A little payback. I just had to make sure they took the bait. I have no doubt that if someone had spoken up, none of this would have happened, I continued, my voice measured. You could have said something to your husbands. Sure, maybe it would have caused an argument. But it also might have stopped it. Mary hesitated, biting her lip, clearly torn between guilt and uncertainty. Allison, however, seemed fixated on finding a way to resolve the situation, her determination unwavering. I'm just not sure there's a way to even things out, like you're suggesting, I admitted. It's not that I'm completely against the idea. I just don't see how it works. Silence stretched between us. Then Allison spoke up, her voice steady. What if one of us did it? I stared at her for a long moment before smirking. Why stop at one? What if it's both of you? Mary's face drained of color. You actually want us to do this? She stammered. I can't. Paul would lose his mind if he found out. I leaned back, my tone laced with sarcasm. Oh, of course. The same Paul who held me down while my wife was about to degrade herself for a poker game? I totally understand your sense of loyalty. I'll do it, Allison said abruptly. Both Mary and I turned to her in shock. You're right, she murmured. We're not blameless in this. Mary shook her head. I can't believe you'd even put me in this situation, Henry. She turned to Allison. If she's willing, that should be enough. No, I said flatly. I had them right where I wanted them. Now I just needed to seal the deal. It's both of you or nothing, I said, my voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. This isn't just about making things even. It's about tipping the scales in my favor. Mary sat frozen, struggling with the weight of her decision. Fear, guilt, contemplation. I could practically see the battle playing out on her face. After a long pause, she finally whispered, If we do this, will you forgive Katie? If you don't, I won't even consider it, I replied, my tone cold and matter-of-fact. You won't tell Paul? She asked cautiously. I gave her a half smile. I won't say a word. Not exactly a lie. I wouldn't tell him outright, but I had a much better way to let him figure it out for himself. I already had my motel room until Wednesday morning. My plan was to keep a low profile for a few more days, then decide whether I'd go back home or start over somewhere else. Mary exhaled shakily, almost to herself. I can't believe this is happening. I gave a dry chuckle. Welcome to my world. If you don't want to, then don't, I added, shrugging. Simple as that. That's not the point, Henry. She ran a hand through her hair. You're a good guy. I like you. If I weren't married, I wouldn't hesitate. But I am married. You're asking me to betray my husband. I shook my head. Mary, I'm not forcing you to do anything. I know, she muttered. But if this is what it takes for you to move past what Paul did, then fine. I'll do it. This is his fault anyway. If he hadn't been an a-hole, I wouldn't be in this situation. She could justify it however she wanted. It didn't matter to me. This wasn't about her. This was about getting back at her husband. All right. Tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, my room. I paused. I'll bring food and wine. Without another word, they stood up and walked away, whispering to each other as they left. They didn't look angry or ashamed. If anything, they looked intrigued. I watched them go, shaking my head at the irony of it all. Here I was, a married man, plotting to sleep with 2 other married women, yet still thinking about the sanctity of marriage. But in my eyes, Katie had already burned ours to the ground. She had humiliated me, made a mockery of our vows. As far as I was concerned, the marriage was already dead. All that remained was the legal paperwork. As for Mary and Allison, they weren't innocent. They had stood by and let it happen. Their husbands had played a direct role in my humiliation, and now they were going to help me set things right. I never understood people who got cheated on and still chose to stay faithful. It was laughable. If one side breaks the rules, the other has no obligation to keep playing fair. Did I think Katie planned to cheat on me? No, but when it came down to it, when her status in that ridiculous poker group was threatened, she didn't hesitate. Not for a second. Yeah, maybe I was being an a-hole. Maybe Katie had a serious gambling problem that needed help. But she wasn't going to get help until she hit rock bottom. Maybe divorce would be that rock bottom. The next day, I made sure Katie wasn't home before I went back to the house. I needed some of my things. Walking through those rooms, seeing the life we had built together, knowing it was all coming to an end, it was a gut punch. But every time nostalgia tried to creep in, I forced myself to picture her kneeling in front of Mark. That image kept my anger fresh. I took only what mattered. My electronics, clothes, a few tools. I wanted nothing that reminded me of her. I'd come back later for the rest. By the afternoon, I had secured a furnished one-bedroom apartment that I could rent on a month-to-month basis. It was small, but it would do. Move-in day was Saturday. With that taken care of, I had one last thing to prepare for. I grabbed lunch, then went shopping. At Best Buy, I picked up an Apple SD card reader and a handful of SD cards. A cheap wireless color printer went into the cart next. After that, I stopped at a liquor store and grabbed 2 bottles of wine, ones I knew Mary and Allison liked. Back at the motel, I staged the room. I scattered a few items around to make it look cluttered, casual. I placed my 35mm camera strategically, making sure it had a clear, unobstructed view of the bed. Among the mess, it wouldn't stand out. At 5:30, I ordered appetizers from a nice restaurant. The food arrived just before 6. At exactly 6:15, a soft knock echoed against the motel door. Showtime. I glanced through the peephole to be sure it was them, not some furious husband ready to start a fight. Not that I was afraid of them, but I had no interest in getting blindsided again. Before opening the door, I discreetly switched on the camera, setting it to record. Then I pulled the door open and stepped aside, allowing them in. "Wine?" I asked casually. They hesitated for a moment, then nodded, seemingly deciding that a little liquid courage wouldn't hurt. "Look," I said, pouring each of them a glass. "We don't have to do anything. We can just drink, eat, and hang out. You both know I'd never pressure you into something you don't want." Allison took a sip, smiling slightly. "That's what makes you different, Henry. You're a good guy. Katie was lucky to have you." Mary nodded in agreement. "We've been thinking a lot since yesterday. You were right. We should have spoken up. Keeping quiet made us complicit, and I'm really sorry." I gave a small nod, swirling the wine in my glass. "I appreciate that. I just wish I understood why it happened." Mary frowned. "What do you mean?" I exhaled slowly. I don't think Katie made that decision in the moment. If she was willing to do it right in front of me, then she must have already convinced herself it was okay. So what I keep wondering is, why? What did I do to make her believe this was something she could get away with? Allison's expression hardened. "Henry, I know this was the first time. Something like that? It doesn't stay hidden forever. If it had happened before, you would have known." She had no idea how right she was. She took another sip of wine, then placed her glass on the table. When she met my gaze again, her lips curled into a playful smirk. "All right, handsome," she said, standing up. "I hate to sound impatient, but I'm going first." Mary blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, what?" Allison turned to me. "Come here, stand by the bed." I raised an eyebrow, but did as she said. She stepped in front of me, her smirk growing. "Okay," she murmured. "I'm going to take everything off. You, just stand still. Hands off. Let me do this." Mary slid into the office chair near the desk, watching with an amused expression. I wondered briefly if they had ever done anything like this before. She had positioned herself in the perfect spot, right where the camera had the clearest angle. Allison moved deliberately, her fingers working the buttons of my shirt, slowly sliding the fabric off my shoulders. She let it hang on my arms, trapping them at my sides, then traced her fingers over my chest. Her movements were confident, practiced. She knelt down and helped me remove my shoes and socks before looking up with a playful smirk. Then she reached for my belt, her movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. When they pulled at my feet, she lowered herself onto her knees. I was tempted to speed things up, but I held back, letting her stay in control. The entire thing was surreal. Brian had no idea how lucky he was. It didn't take long. When she finished, she remained on her knees, looking up at me. I reached forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "That was incredible, Allison. Absolutely incredible." Mary chuckled from across the room. I grinned. "Give me a few minutes to recover." We sat back down, picking at the food and drinking more wine. As we ate, the conversation drifted back to what had happened after I walked out of Larry and Sandy's house on Saturday night. Allison was the first to speak. Well, you were still there when Katie spotted those extra cards near Mark and realized he was cheating. At first, he couldn't even respond. He was too scared to move because of all the glass covering him. Mary nodded. Yeah, you should have seen his face when the paramedics finally arrived. It took them longer than expected, and by the time they got there, he looked rough. When they had him move his hands away from his face, God, it was bad. Allison smirked and turned toward me. By the way, what happened to "I'll go meet the ambulance"? She asked, mimicking my voice mockingly. I shrugged. Must have slipped my mind. Shame he didn't just bleed out. Mary shuddered. Well, once they started treating him, he wouldn't shut up. He kept insisting he hadn't cheated, that Katie still owed him the bed, and that he was going to hunt you down and knock the crap out of you. The usual. You should have seen all the blood, Allison added. They didn't even try moving him right away. They just wrapped him up and hauled him off. Mary sighed. Katie swore she'd never pay up unless Mark proved he hadn't cheated. I raised an eyebrow. So if Mark somehow did prove he didn't cheat, she was still willing to go through with it? The room went silent. Neither of them had an answer. Finally, Mary muttered, I don't think that's even a possibility anymore. You're sure about that? I asked. Allison nodded. Mark had so many tiny cuts all over his body. Most were minor, but a few were deep enough to need stitches. He had 2 nasty gashes on his stomach. He was in the hospital until Monday while they pulled all the glass out. Larry went to visit him, Mary added. Allison rolled her eyes. Yeah, and Mark lost it, said he was going to make you pay, get his winnings from Katie, and then screw her in front of you just to prove a point. I let out a laugh. Wow, delusional, Mary sighed. Look, Mark's never coming back to poker night, not after getting caught cheating, but Larry's still pissed. He wants you to pay for the curio cabinet, and since his homeowner's insurance is covering Mark's medical bills, he wants you to replace everything that broke inside it. I smirked, leaning back. Mary, do me a favor. Tell Larry and Sandy that I'll pay exactly 10 cents, but only if a judge orders me to. She frowned. What does that mean? It means there will be court records, legal statements, public documentation. I let the words sink in before continuing. And you know what my statement will say? That I walked into a full-blown orgy. That when I tried to stop my wife from participating, Larry, Brian, and Paul physically restrained me. Mary's eyes widened. I'll name every single person involved, I added, my tone casual. And I'll make sure everyone sees the court records. Their neighbors, their families, their jobs, every single church they attend. I'll make sure they all get copies. Hell, I'll send one to Oprah if I have to. A heavy silence filled the room. Then after a long pause, Mary suddenly blurted out, Okay, my turn, let's go. I raised an eyebrow. All right, but I want you both undressed too, Mary scoffed. We don't have to be undressed for this. Allison laughed. I know we don't have to be, but it feels kind of unfair being the only one stripped down. Mary rolled her eyes. Ugh, fine. We've already crossed a line. What's one more? Without another word, she pulled off her top. Allison followed. I stood at the foot of the bed once more, this time with Mary kneeling in front of me. She didn't hesitate. I tried to focus on anything else, to pace myself. But before I could, Allison suddenly sprang up from her chair and playfully shoved me backward onto the mattress. I landed on my back, caught off guard, while Mary remained on her knees, watching with amusement. Before I could react, Allison climbed on top of me, straddling my waist. After a few intense minutes, I could feel myself nearing the edge. Mary, clearly impatient, spoke up. All right, my turn. She shot Allison a look. Move over. With a laugh, Allison rolled to the side, making room for Mary to take over. Eventually, she collapsed beside me, catching her breath. I turned my head toward Mary and Allison. So, have you two done this before? Mary smirked. We've had our moments. Allison leaned in slightly. You know we went to college together, right? I nodded. Yeah. She gave a coy smile. Well, we may have shared once or twice. Mary scoffed, raising an eyebrow at her. Once or twice. Allison chuckled. Fine. A lot. They exchanged a knowing glance before bursting into laughter. Mary sat up, brushing her hair back. That was fun, but I should get going. Then, her expression turned more serious. Henry, I hope this helps settle things for you. Call me tomorrow, okay? Let me know where your head's at. I really want you and Katie to work this out. I don't want to lose you as a friend. Allison nodded in agreement. Seriously, Henry, we feel awful for not speaking up. If you ever want to talk, you know where to find me. I gave them a small smirk. Just to be clear, this was probably a one-time thing. Mary raised an eyebrow. Probably, Allison laughed. Oh, come on, Mary. We both know we'll end up doing this again. Mary sighed, but couldn't hide her smirk. Yeah, but let's be a lot smarter about it next time. No more poker night nonsense. Agreed, Allison said with a wink. I chuckled. We'll talk soon, or someday. I'll let you know. The two of them got dressed, gave me a final glance, and left. Once the door clicked shut, I got to work. I sat at my laptop, carefully editing the video, trimming it down to the most revealing, undeniable moments. Then, I selected key still images, printing a handful of incriminating shots featuring both women. I transferred the final cut onto multiple SD cards and sealed each one inside a plain envelope. 9 envelopes in total. Each contained an SD card and a stack of explicit photos, cropped and blurred just enough to ensure my face wasn't visible. The setting, however, was unmistakable to anyone who knew us. Satisfied with my preparations, I set the envelopes aside, stretched out on the bed, and fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up, I turned my phone back on. Unsurprisingly, it was flooded with missed calls and unread messages from Katie, dozens of them. I didn't bother reading or listening, but I kept them. I had a feeling they'd come in handy. First order of business, I called my boss, letting him know I'd be taking the rest of the week off. Then I waited for Katie to leave for work before heading home to grab more of my tools and personal belongings. By lunchtime, my phone buzzed again. This time I picked up. What? My voice was cold, detached. There was a brief silence, as if she hadn't expected me to answer. When she finally spoke, her words spilled out in a frantic rush. Henry, please don't hang up. We need to talk. I know I screwed up, but we can fix this. Just come home and let's figure things out. We can get through this. I cut her off. Listen carefully, Katie. Saturday, 6 o'clock, Larry and Sandy's. I want everyone who was there that night to be there, except your boyfriend. If he shows up, I'll put him back in the hospital. Her voice snapped back, defensive. He's not my boyfriend, Henry. And anyway, he's barely in any shape to leave the house. I didn't react. As you say, Saturday, 6 o'clock. This isn't some social gathering, it's a discussion. You and your friends can try to convince me why I shouldn't file for divorce. I haven't read your messages, so be ready to explain. A note of desperation crept into her voice. Henry, please don't throw our marriage away over a stupid bet. Ignoring her plea, I shifted the topic. When's the next poker night? She hesitated. I don't know. A few weeks, maybe? The uncertainty in her tone was obvious. You don't have to come if you don't want to. See you Saturday. Her voice cracked. Henry, I love you. Please come home. I stayed firm. See you Saturday. She still didn't get it. In her mind, the real issue wasn't what she had done. It was my reaction to it. She believed she had been fulfilling some twisted obligation, that I was overreacting to something she had to do. She still couldn't see that she had a problem, that her loyalty to a poker game had outweighed her commitment to our marriage. She hadn't hit rock bottom yet. The next few days passed without much incident. I went to Walmart, picking up essentials for my new apartment, kitchenware, bathroom supplies, bedding. A lot more than I'd initially planned, but starting fresh meant making sure I had the basics. At night, I researched divorce. No kids. If we sold the house, we'd split about $15,000 each. No major debts, similar incomes. Legally, it would be straightforward. By Saturday afternoon, I sent Katie a single message. Text me when everyone's there. I had no intention of sitting around awkwardly waiting for people to show up or re-explaining everything for latecomers. At 5:45 p.m., her reply came through. Everyone's here. We're waiting in the dining room. At 5:55, I rang the doorbell. Katie opened the door, frowning. Henry, this is your house. You don't have to ring the doorbell. I stepped past her without acknowledging the comment. The dining room was just as I remembered. Same long table, a relic from Katie's grandmother, big enough for 10. 4 chairs on each side, 1 at each end. Larry sat at the far right, Sandy across from him. To her left, 3 empty chairs. Opposite them sat Paul, Brian, Mary, and Allison. Terry was stationed at the head of the table. Katie walked past me, sliding into one of the empty seats, clearly expecting me to sit beside her. Instead, I strode toward the chair at the left end, where Terry was sitting. I stopped behind him. That's my seat. Katie frowned. You can sit next to me. I smirked. How about we bet on it? Maybe a BJ will seal the deal. Her face paled. Henry. Ignoring her, I turned to Terry. Katie, go ahead and start recording. I have a feeling you'll want this on file. Without a word, Terry stood and moved to the other side of Katie, leaving the seat empty for me. I placed my duffel bag onto the chair beside me. Katie hesitated, then reached for her phone, launching the recording app and setting it on the table. I leaned back, scanning the room, the weight of silence pressing down. All right, I said. We all know why we're here. I'm considering divorcing Catherine. If you think I shouldn't, convince me. I turned to Terry first. He sighed. Honestly, Henry, I'm not the best person to ask. My wife cheated and I walked away. No regrets. I'm sorry this happened to you. Fair enough. I shifted to Larry. What about you? Larry shrugged. She loves you. She's gorgeous. Did you really think she was perfect before you met? I smirked. No, but I expected her to be after. I tilted my head. Would you be fine with Sandy doing the same thing? Larry didn't answer. Sandy looked uncomfortable. I chuckled. So, you two have an open arrangement? Sandy's face burned red. The table went dead silent, except for Larry, who only glared at me. Katie turned to Sandy, wide-eyed. Wait, seriously? Sandy broke. Only a few times? I hate it, but Larry insists. I want to stop, but he won't let me. I kept my voice calm. Sandy, you don't have to do anything you don't want to. Larry's jaw clenched. You creep. I told Katie years ago you were an a-hole. She should have left you. Because I don't play poker? Larry slammed his fist on the table. You wrecked my curio cabinet because your wife honored a bet. His face turned red with anger. Maybe I should smash everything in this house. I met his glare with an easy smile. Go ahead. None of it means anything to me. He sat back, fuming. I turned to Paul and Brian. You two want to take a turn? Paul hesitated. Look, man, we don't want you guys to split. I cut in. No, Paul. You're friends with Catherine. I was just her husband. Paul shook his head. That's not true, Henry. You're my friend. I leaned forward. Funny, I thought so too. Until you stood by while they held me down so my wife could humiliate me. Paul sighed. Look, Mary wasn't involved. It was just us. I glanced at Mary and Allison. Both stared at the table, avoiding my gaze. Tell me, Paul, if you walked into a bar and saw Brian's wife with another man, what would you do? Step in? Call Brian? Paul swallowed. And if it were Brian cheating instead? Would you tell Allison? Silence. I nodded. Thought so. You'd protect Brian, but his wife? She's just your friend's wife. That's the problem. Katie is your friend. I'm not. If I hadn't walked into that room, none of you would have told me. I turned to Katie. When did you stop respecting me? She flinched. Henry, I do respect you. More than anyone. I scoffed. Then tell me, when did I ever make you think this was okay? I never said you did, she murmured. Then how many times has this happened before? Her eyes widened. Never? Then why do you look so shocked by the question? If I hadn't caught you, would you have told me? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I exhaled. That's the issue. You were willing to risk our marriage, but not your poker group. You made your choice, and it wasn't me. I turned to Paul and Brian. And you two? You knew she valued that game more than her husband, and instead of setting her straight, you encouraged it. They didn't argue. I smirked. Tell me, if your wives slept with another man, how would you react? Paul and Brian exchanged grins. Would she get paid for it? Paul chuckled. Mary's face went pale. Brian smirked. Yeah. And would she pick up any new skills? I smiled. So, when's the next poker night? They exchanged glances before Brian asked, Why? You planning to come? No, I said. I just want to know when. Katie frowned. Henry, I don't get it. You say you won't come, but you keep asking. I sighed. All right, I've heard enough. I reached into my duffel bag, pulling out the envelopes. I had come here ready to tear their lives apart, but looking around, I realized they were already crumbling. I put the envelopes back. Turning to Katie, I spoke evenly. You ripped my heart out, and you never even apologized. Not once. You humiliated me, and you don't even think you did anything wrong. Tears welled in her eyes. Henry, I held up a hand. Your spot in this group mattered more to you than I did. That's the truth. She reached for me. No, Henry, I love you. I pulled back. Calm down, Catherine. It's my turn now. Her lip trembled. You never took responsibility, I continued. You just made excuses. You told me to move past it, but you never once admitted you were wrong, and you're still planning on going back to that table." I let the words sink in. "So tell me, if you were willing to bet sexual favors while I was there, what exactly are you willing to bet when I'm not?" Katie's face drained of color. I leaned in. "What happens next time you lose? Should I be ready to raise another man's kid because you bet the wrong hand?" Her voice wavered. "Henry, we're done," I said, standing. "You have a gambling problem. Get help. I'm filing for divorce on Monday. You can keep the house, the furniture, hell, keep your friends too." Brian scoffed. "What an a-hole." Before I could respond, Allison slammed her hand on the table. "Screw you, Brian." The room fell silent. Brian blinked. "What?" She shook her head, voice trembling with anger. "Henry's right. We let this happen. We destroyed his marriage for our own amusement. He should hate all of us." She turned to me. "Henry, can I leave with you?" Another beat of silence. Then Mary spoke. "You know what, Paul? I'm sick of being the only responsible one in this marriage." Paul frowned. "What are you saying?" She exhaled. "Henry adored Katie, and I used to wish you treated me like that, but you helped ruin his marriage." She turned to me. "Henry, I thought it was a joke. I didn't think she'd actually do it. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. Maybe it's a blessing you found out before kids were involved." She grabbed her purse. "I'm coming too." I stood. "Let's go." We left as Katie sobbed. Larry and Sandy argued, and Paul and Brian barked threats at their wives. As we stepped outside, Mary and Allison each flipped them off. I dropped them at Allison's parents' house before heading back to my motel. Finished the last of the liquor, ate junk food, and passed out. The divorce was simple. Katie put everything in storage, and I took what little I wanted. Mary and Allison left their husbands, and the three of us stayed close, just friends with occasional benefits, nothing deeper. Katie never reached out. Honestly, I expected her to fight for us, maybe push for counseling, but she didn't. That told me all I needed to know. Our marriage never meant as much to her as it had to me. Sitting at the bar where Katie and I used to go for special occasions, I stared into my beer, lost in thought. The divorce had been final for months, but I still found myself there, missing her. A voice behind me interrupted my thoughts. "Is this seat taken?" I didn't look up. "Go ahead." The chair scraped against the floor as they sat. "A guy like you, drinking alone? That's surprising," she said. I sighed. "My two best friends are out on a double date. Guess that leaves me here." She chuckled. "Funny, I thought I had great friends too. Turns out they weren't so great." I turned to look. My breath caught. "Katie." She smiled softly. "I ran into some people who said there was a kind, lonely guy sitting in this bar. Thought I'd introduce myself." I smirked, playing along. "Nice to meet you, Katie. I'm Henry." Her eyes sparkled. "So why are you drinking alone? Celebrating something?" "Not exactly," I admitted. "I failed at marriage. Couldn't stop my wife from cheating, so I left her. Now my friends are off living their lives, and here I am." She exhaled. "Maybe I failed too. I had the best husband in the world, and I hurt him in the worst way. He left me, and he was right to—" "Sounds like a smart guy," I said, glancing at her. "What happened to you?" Her expression darkened. "Losing him was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to take a hard look at myself. I didn't like what I saw. I started therapy for obsession and haven't stopped since." I swallowed hard. "So you finally saw what I was trying to warn you about?" She nodded. "I did, and I get it now. My amazing husband saw my problem, tried to save me, and I refused to listen. In the end, our marriage never stood a chance. My obsession would have ended his love for me eventually." I hesitated. "I never stopped loving you, Kat. I couldn't stay." Her eyes welled with tears. "I know. And for what it's worth, I hated when you called me Catherine. Hearing you say Kat again means a lot." She took a deep breath before speaking. "I came here because I need to tell you something." Her voice wavered, but she pushed forward. "That night at poker, I thought I had the winning hand. When I didn't, I was stunned, but I still felt obligated to pay up. I never even saw it as sex or cheating. To me, it was just keeping my word, like a handshake. I was terrified of being kicked out." She hesitated, her gaze dropping. "I didn't think it would hurt us because it never even crossed my mind that you would leave me. I knew you'd be mad, but I thought you'd understand that I had to do it." A bitter edge crept into her tone. Now I see it for what it was. The most disgusting, humiliating thing I could have done to the man who loved me. Her voice trembled. At the time, I thought you were overreacting. But after I started therapy, my counselor had me write down everything from that night. When I told her how you kept asking when the next poker night was, she laughed and called you a genius. She told me our marriage lasted longer than it should have. And just so you know, there were no more poker nights. I haven't touched a deck of cards since that night, and I never will. She swallowed hard. I cut all of them off, Henry. I haven't spoken to any of them in a long time. I raised an eyebrow. How's Sandy? Katie gave a small smile. She's doing well. She finally left Larry. I frowned.
Why?
He was worse than we realized, controlling, manipulative. She was too embarrassed to admit it for a long time, but she finally found the strength to walk away. She's with someone great now. Her gaze softened as she met my eyes. Henry, you were right about everything. I let that poker group become my whole world, and I put it above you. Above us. I always knew you loved me, which is why I assumed you'd understand. But real friends wouldn't have let things get that far. And Mark, I let that creep push things to the edge. If you hadn't stopped me that night, I don't even want to think about what would have happened next. She wiped at her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry, Henry, for everything. You deserve better, and I hope you found happiness. A pause, then hesitantly. I'd love to have you in my life again, even just as a friend. But I understand if that's not possible. She stood. I should go before I start crying in the middle of a bar. Take care, Henry. She turned toward the door. I took a deep breath. Hey, Kat. She stopped but didn't turn. Yeah? I hesitated, then smiled. Have you eaten? Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. No, Henry, not yet. I stood and walked over, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She let out a small, shaky breath as I pulled her close. Then let's go get some real food. That night, we started over. Slowly. A few months later, we moved back in together. 9 months after that, we stood at the courthouse on our original wedding anniversary and made it official again. It just seemed fitting. Katie never gambled again. Not once. Not even for fun. People say once a cheater, always a cheater, but I don't believe that applied to her. Her obsession clouded her judgment, but once she faced it, she changed. She never meant to hurt me. She just hadn't realized the damage she was causing. As for the poker group, the men stayed friends except Terry. Mark vanished. Last I heard, he left town. Katie and I, we stayed close with Sandy, Allison, and Mary, and now they're the godmothers to our son.